Listening to podcasts with you prepares me to survive anything. Why have they stopped? Oh, it's pathetic. When did they last release something worth watching, eh? When did we last see a decent interview?
Last week.
What?
The Dalek voice man.
That was a repeat.
It wasn't. You're thinking of that producer. He wasn't a Dalek voice. Not at the beginning, anyway.
Yes, he was. I'm going to sleep anyway.
Can't. You've got to subscribe.
Do it for me.
Do you want Polcorp's calling here? Do you, Dwayne?
How would they know it wasn't me subscribing?
I'd tell them. G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who in the audio medium. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Philip. G'day Dwayne, g'day audiophiles.
Hello Philip. How are you on this lovely eve?
I am warm.
Are you really?
It's it's been about 30 degrees today up here. And as much as I've had the air conditioner going, we turn it off once the solar panels stop working, so we try and turn the air conditioner off as soon as the sun goes down, but the house is feeling very warm at the moment.
Well, that's the trouble with good insulation. It keeps it in.
It does.
Yes.
So
it's about a third cooler here. It's about 20, 21 degrees here today. So
that's very nice.
I'm still feeling cool, and I would like it to be warmer, but, you know. Anyone would think we're English talking about the weather like this.
Yes.
Today's
I'm just going to make another derogatory comment. Shouldn't do that with half our audience being from the UK.
More than half, isn't it? Yeah. It's going to be a good show. It is going to be a good show because today we are going back in time once again. We're going to be looking at some classic Big Finish. Yes, it's been around that long. There is classic Big Finish. We're going to be looking at a couple of stories from the second 50 of the monthly range. We're going to look at number 51, which is the Wormery. We're also going to look at number 54, which is the Natural History of Fear. The first one is a Sixth Doctor adventure with Iris Wildthyme, and the second one is an Eighth Doctor, Charlie and Kerry's story. And we've got some other treats in store for you as well, because not only are we going to be speaking with producer Gary Russell about both of these stories, but Katy Manning has decided to pop in and talk about the Wormery as well. So that will be exciting, I'm sure, Philip.
It will be mad, but then that's what I always love about Katy.
That's what it's all about.
So why aren't we doing number 50, 51, 52, and 53?
Well,
Dwayne, I know there's a good reason.
The Wormery is 51, but 52 and 53. Scherzo, we've already touched on when we've talked with Rob Shearman. So seek out our Rob Shearman episode. And the Creed of the Crommen, we spoke about that story with Conrad Westmass being his introductory story as Kerres. So you can seek out Conrad's interview with us too. So that's why we've skipped those two and gone for the others. And it was a good excuse too, because I've been dying to have a look at the Natural History of Fear. It's one of my favourites. But I was also pleasantly surprised to go back to the Wormery as well, because it sort of nudged in between those two Eighth Doctor stories, the Greyest, the anniversary story, and Scherzo. It often gets overlooked, so it's nice to be given the Wormery a bit of love. But before we do that, Philip, do you know what?
No, what, Dwayne?
Oh, we have to jump down the rabbit hole. Let's go. Right, down this rabbit hole today, Philip, I've got a question for you. Of course, the Wormery introduces another Time Lord, Iris Wildthyme. And we've had a few of those throughout the decades of Doctor Who, other Time Lords that the Doctor has encountered on his travels. What are some standouts for you that you really that appeal to you apart from Iris?
Well, they all appeal to me a bit. I mean, the first one, of course, is the monk, and I think Peter Buttersworth as the monk is just magnificent. And so, even though that's before we actually know their Time Lords, we don't know what their stories Peter Butterworth, he's always been a bit of a star for me. I mean, I've loved him for the Carry On films. He's one of those English actors I actually knew from Doctor Who, because often, big names come on Doctor Who, I've got no idea who they are. And even today, someone from Coronation Street like Millie Gibson, and she's this big star. I don't know, we don't get Coronation Street out here, I don't think. So often people talk about these big names, and I don't know them, which I don't mind. I mean, I'm happy just to watch actors be actors without knowing who they are beforehand. But Peter Butterworth is someone I knew, and I think he's wonderful. He's charming. He's just naughty, and just the fact that he's a meddler as opposed to, he's got evil intent. But he just what he gets up to is naughty. Roger Delgado's the Master is probably the definitive Time Lord. So I do love the Master. And I think in some ways there's I was going to say decreasing love. No, I think, no. Different Masters have different appeals at different times. And I enjoyed Anthony Ainley at the time. Looking back now, I think he's a bit too and too many chuckles and things. But at the time, it didn't bother me at all as a kid with Anthony Ainley. But as an adult, still looking back on Roger Delgado's performance, it is just exquisite. And he's just so charming and so lovely and yet evil. But I mean, all the incarnations of the Master have brought different things. And of course, the other one that stands out, which I still think could have been done better, was the Rani, in terms of someone who's just immoral. She's not evil per se, but she just has no morality. She's all about wanting to do what she wants to do, regardless of the consequences. And just a character like that, I think they could have done so much more with her than that. And it's always a shame, I think, that Kate O'Mara died before Big Finish got to make the stories they'd written for her, because I don't think the recast of the Rani really quite worked. It's been a while since I've listened to them, but at the time I don't remember being that impressed by the Rani stories. So they're probably big standouts. Do you have any other standouts, or will they be the same for you?
No, you were actually picking out the big villains that, and I was thinking more along the lines of the little cameos that came along. So yes, the monk was one who appeared in a couple of stories on television and has appeared in a few stories on Big Finish, which is fantastic. But there's others we've never really got a chance to explore, like the War Chief, although he was probably explored in a book that I haven't read. It might have been in that book by Terence Dix. Was it World's End? Is that what it was called? There's also Campo from Planet of the Spiders. There's a history there that could be possibly explored, and it may have been in some media that I'm not aware of. All of these could have been possibly. One that I really enjoy is Drax. I've always enjoyed Drax, and I love what Big Finish has done with him, especially John Dorney's. Well, it's only John Dorney that's written the Drax stories. There's two of those. With the
well, it's funny, on TV I could take or leave Drax, wouldn't care.
Really?
But the audio Drax stories are magnificent.
They are, because the stories are all centered around Drax, whereas the character's just there for 2 episodes in the Armageddon Factor, which is surrounded by this big arc. So there's him too. Barusa's always been an interesting character for me as well. So I'd love to explore some of the history behind, Barusa. When you think Barusa, who do you think of? Which one? Well, I always think of the Invasion of Time, because that was the first one I saw. Yeah. So it was named John Arnott, was it? Was that his name? John Arnott, yeah. But I mean, we've got 3. None of the others feel like Barusa to me. Even the Five Doctors one. Deadly Assassin. Yeah, no, because once again, my Barusa wouldn't go bad. Right. So when he goes evil and he's all about power, that was never Barusa. He's nothing like Invasion of Time, where he just is so cynical about power. Yeah, he certainly wasn't going to be the type to want to be president, and certainly not to be president for all eternity. Yeah, but he was kind of kindly as well, in a way. He was trying to. It was almost like a facade that he was trying to put on that Invasion of Time Barusa, of being snarky and irritated, but really underneath he was had good motives. You kind of got that feeling. Yeah, which the Five Doctors one didn't. No, it was the opposite. He was trying to be the exact opposite. Asmael is also a character that has interested me. He probably gets forgotten.
Who's that?
Because Asmael is from the Twin Dilemma.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's
okay. Do we notice that all these characters all come from pretty ordinary shows? Armageddon, Factor, Twin Dilemma. These Time Lords that pop in are often from pretty not so good shows.
Yeah.
Even the Rani shows.
Interesting.
Really
but I've always remembered them, particularly because it's Maurice Denham who plays Asmael. Classic actor. And I've thought, they talk about, getting drunk on the fountain, and I've always wondered what that story might be, whether it's been covered in somewhere or other that I have never seen. Please let me know, because I'd love to. I think I actually wrote some fan fiction once which contained Asmael. I think it was Asmael and the Fourth Doctor. I think I might have actually written the getting drunk in the fountain scene. Can't remember. I have to see if I can dig it out. It would have been 20 years ago at least, if not more. So, they're just some. When it comes to audio, probably one of my favourite audio-created Time Lords would be the 11. What an amazingly faceted Time Lord character. And, of course, there's all the Time Lords that were invented for Gallifrey as well. So, we got to know the Inquisitor's name and got to know her very well.
Darkle.
Yep, and there was, Brax is certainly one of the best audio. How can you get sick of listening to Miles Richardson's voice? It's amazing. So
and Narvin,
yeah,
Sean Carlson,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. The list goes on. There's some really, really good audio invented Time Lords to choose from. So they're just some of my favourites. What are yours? Let us know in the comments, or send us a DM even, or add us at any of our socials. We're on Blue Sky, that seems to be all the rage, or it was, but it's died down a bit. But it's there. So yeah, we'll climb up out of the rabbit hole and we'll talk about these two stories. Now we'll start with the earlier one first, and it's the.
Can I say, Dwayne, before we start, there will be spoilers. So can I strongly suggest, if you haven't listened to these stories, the Wormery probably may not matter so much. There's some nice twists at the end that might be spoiled for you. But are we going
to spoil the natural history of fear? Are we?
I think we probably will.
Okay.
Along the way, so I think we probably will spoil it.
Okay.
And so if you haven't listened to it, I think at the moment they're both free on Spotify. Is that right?
They could be. I'm not sure because they're post 50. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll.
But that being said, they're only £3 or £4, guys, and so in Australia it's under $8.
Under $8
for these.
Yeah, it definitely.
In Australia, but
definitely worth it.
So it's £3-4, and I think you can probably find it for free on Spotify. So my suggestion would be, don't listen on until you've listened to the two stories. Both of them are highly worth listening to. So get them. It's worth the £4, and have a listen, especially the Natural History of Fear, because that is going to have an amazing surprise ending. You don't know what's coming.
Exactly. All right, well, let me read a blurb for the Wormery, and then we'll have a little chat about it. There's one place in creation where the truth really can be found in the bottom of a glass. Bianca's, a very special and very elusive little club. The Doctor, careworn and seeking quiet distraction, gains admission. But his rest and relaxation is soon shattered by the wobbly arrival of a louche trans-temporal adventuress, Iris Wildthyme. She claims she's on a secret mission of vital importance, the success of which hinges on her getting paralytic. When she's drunk, she can hear the whispering voices in her head. The Doctor soon learns that Bianca's airs and graces cover not just one malevolent power lurking in the shadows, but several, and a wriggling, writhing presence has designs on the clientele, just as Bianca herself has designs on the Doctor. At last, after so many centuries, the weary Time Lord is dragged by the heels into that darkest of undiscovered countries, love.
You know, there was once a place where the truth really could be found in the bottom of a glass. And the more you drank, the clearer the truth became. And the only place you could go to get a drink in those heady, wicked days. Bianca's.
Are you averse to a good, strong liquor, Doctor? You know who I am?
I am Bianca. I am very knowledgeable, wearyingly so.
And I shall deal with this lady, Ms.
Wildthyme, Ms. Iris Wildthyme, trans-temporial adventuress extraordinaire, at your service.
Iris Wildthyme, I want a word with you.
My nerves really can't take this.
Are you true to us, my darling? Tell me, I implore you, do. Tell me you're true now, my darling. You carry our dreams with you.
Why, Doctor and your friend, welcome back.
We found it difficult to tear ourselves away.
Iris, I'm glad to see you a little more dignified.
Oh, the night's still young, lovey. Remember young, do you?
Really, my dear Doctor, where did you find her?
All through my lives, in all the wrong places.
You must not upset Sturmer and his men. We love them, and all the little things they do. And the Doctor. We love the Doctor. He has knowledge we need.
I don't fancy her much in this incarnation.
I'm sorry?
All the others I do, you see. All the others, I'd be off like a shot. Never mind, Chuck, better luck next time.
The audio medium, it can be so deceptive.
The Wormery, the Facts and the Trivia, written by Stephen Cole and Paul Magrs, recorded on the 1st and the 10th of November in 2002, released November 2003, so a big year gap between recording and release. Directed by Gary Russell, music by Stephen Cole, the author, and Jason Loberick, sound design by Ian Potter. The executive producer was Jacqueline Rayner, the producers were Gary Russell and Jason Hay-Ellery, and the cover art by Lee Binding. It starred Colin Baker as the Doctor and Katy Manning as Iris Wildthyme. Not Joe Grant, but Iris Wildthyme. Also starring Mary McElwain as Bianca in her first Big Finish production, and Jane McFarlane as Mickey. Paul Clayton plays Henry, who's better known now for playing Mr. Colchester in Torchwood in lots of episodes. Mark Donovan, Jason Loberick, and James Campbell were also in the cast, with a surprise and uncredited appearance by Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor. First spoiler, so I hope you listen to it. Paul Magrs was the creator of the character Iris Wildthyme and wanted to write this story for her in the main range of Doctor Who. At this stage, Gary Russell wouldn't employ previous companions in their television companions if their Doctor was unavailable, but he was prepared to give them a different role to play. So Katy Manning had first brought to life Iris in two of the Excella series with Peter Davison in one play and Lisa Bow in another. The Wormery was originally planned to be a free giveaway to subscribers, but Gary decided it was too good for that. The dangers of the time ram with two TARDISes occupying the same space was first discussed in The Time Monster, where Casey as Joe tried to make one happen to the Master. All the songs recorded in this were recorded live, and the song that Iris sings would later become her theme song with her own range of stories later on, though now accompanied by a larger band and orchestra. Iris fancies the Doctor in all his regenerations, except for this one with the Sixth Doctor, Paul Collin. And in some ways, this became a precursor, a trial pilot to see whether Iris CDs and stories would be popular. Wormholes were discussed early on in the play as red herrings of the title of the Wormery and to hide the real meaning of the title and the alien threat. And that is the facts and the trivia.
Thank you, Philip. It was nice to go back to this. It's out of all those early stories, this might be one that I've listened to not so much as the others, probably because of the way it's kind of shoved in between Zagreus and Scherzo. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, certainly. This arrived in the same pack as Zagreus did. And Zagreus was a marvellous 3-disc. It opened up, amazing illustrations, a huge cast list of every Doctor and companion you could possibly imagine. And I was straight into Zagreus. And so for me, I was hanging off Zagreus. The first 2 seasons of Paul McGann had been magnificent, ended with a huge cliffhanger of Neverland, which had been more than 12 months ago. And so I was really hanging out for the new series of Paul McGann's to come out. And Zagreus came out, Scherzo was coming the following month, and then moving on with the new season in a new universe. to me, it was all about Paul McGann. And unfortunately, this little CD that came with Zagreus, it kind of got left for a long time. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have even listened to it until I'd finished the new Paul McGann series. And I'm not sure I listened to it again, except for today or this week. This may be only the second time I listened to it, which is a dreadful admission to make. But I don't remember listening to it apart from initially 20 years ago, and then today. So as far as I know, this is actually a story that I've only ever listened to once before, and I'd almost totally forgotten it.
Maybe it's a good thing to forget these stories so you can go back completely fresh. But yeah, I love... obviously written by Paul Magrs. When you see Paul Magrs, you know you're going to get something quite quirky. I mean, but it wasn't the first taste we'd had of Iris. We had Iris in the Excellus trilogy. She was in Excellus Dawns, the first in Excellus trilogy, which was the double CD. Then she was in the Benny story, Plague Herds of Excellus. I'm not sure if that had been released by the time this came out. It probably was.
It had.
It had
been. It was.
So we'd seen her twice. In that series, so which is something we need to have a look at too.
Did you know who Iris was at all beforehand? I mean,
yes,
except for when she appeared in Excellus, I didn't know who she was. You knew her from previous other medium?
No, only from Excellus. That's the first time I think wasn't that the first place she'd been?
No, she's been in a series of books beforehand.
Oh, okay.
No, you didn't know that. Iris had been in a whole series of books,
right? Before,
So she was a character that existed in the Doctor Who universe.
Yep.
During the whole 90s, during the hiatus, and so Paul Magrs had written a number of stories about her, and I think she had met doctors and things. There's a whole history of Iris long before she comes to Big Finish.
Gotcha. Okay. No, I'd never. Well, Excellus was the first time I'd ever heard of her, but boy, was she was played really well, because at this stage, like, there was no chance of companions, as you'd already said, returning with doctors who weren't with us anymore, which also included Tom Baker at the time, but obviously John Pertwee, and this was the first we'd heard of Katy. And boy, was she was kind of born for this role, maybe even more than for Jo. This is so Katy. When you know Katy as a person, this is Katy Manning more than Jo ever was. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I mean, Katy can be quite mad at times, and we said it all love, because I love her to death. But Iris, she just inhabits totally because of what she gets away with, and just mad, which I love. And Iris is crazy as, but boy, it works so well for her.
So we've got the Sixth Doctor and Iris this time. So we'd only had her with the Fifth Doctor previously on audio that we'd heard. And it was interesting because the Sixth Doctor, you even look at the cover, it's a very melancholy Sixth Doctor that we've got here. He's virtually coming to this bar to have a bit of a sook about being put on trial in Trial of a Time Lord. So it links directly to that. So it's towards the end of his life as the Sixth Doctor. And he's gone there to... Is it?
No, I think it's fairly early on, because, I mean, all the stuff with Maggie Stables, Evelyn Smiles to follow here. He's going to meet Bonnie again. So in terms of Big Finish storylines, the Sixth Doctor's got a long, long way to go. So my thinking is, it's the end of the trial, he's had to drop Bonnie back again, and now he's travelling. This is just before he goes and picks up Evelyn. And then he's going to travel with Evelyn for years, and then he's going to go back and get Bonnie, and then and then Charlie. So this is actually still quite early on. He's actually quite early on in his run, but it is after the trial and before he starts traveling with Bonnie properly. And I said Evelyn falls in between then, because in the Big Finish he travels with Evelyn and then picks up Bonnie.
I guess just because end of the trial, I think of Mel, and so I think Mel's there between the 6th and the 7th. So I always kind of in my head think that's the end. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There was a lot that has happened in between all that.
Big Finish has put in decades,
yes, if not centuries. But yeah, it was nice to to see that reflective side of the Sixth Doctor. Well, not really reflective so much as he was quite grumpy about it, or quite melancholy about it all, and that was the place to go. So, so he's met Bianca, had a bit of a romance with Bianca for some unknown reason. He doesn't quite know why that is. I recognised Paul Clayton's voice instantly when I was listening to this. I hadn't looked at the cast list. I went, Mr. Colt there. He's had a role before Mr. Colchester, which I'm much more familiar with him there. But as the story progressed and went on, there's lots of references to Trial of a Time Lord, to the Valeyard and the relationship between the Doctor and the Valeyard, and how that relates to the story here, the relationship between Bianca and Iris. Have I just spoiled something else there, Philip, by saying that?
Maybe.
Yeah, but it's interesting the way it all plays out. The cliffhanger, I think it's episode 2, the cliffhanger where Iris starts singing, and the Doctor begs her to stop singing, otherwise you'll destroy us all. I think that's a really cool cliffhanger. And you've got that sort of relationship between the Sixth Doctor and Bianca, Sixth Doctor and Iris. You've got the interplay between Iris and the Sixth Doctor. She doesn't like this regeneration, but by the end of it, she wants to give him a cuddle and goes, "Oh, that's very nice." I can just totally see that happening in my mind. It's beautiful to imagine as you're listening.
I think part of the setting is so effective. I mean, me with my love of musicals, it's kind of a cross between Cabaret, which is all set in the 1930s Berlin, just before Hitler comes to power, but it's got all that foreboding what's about to come. But to me, there's also Casablanca in this. It's got that sort of black and white Art Nouveau. And even the main character, the person who runs the bar, is Bianca, which is a bit like Casablanca. I was curious to know whether she was actually named, because there's a lot of Casablanca. The friendship between Iris and the Doctor is almost the same as what's set up in Casablanca with the Harry Bogart companion and character. So there's a lot of stuff in here that makes me think of German expressionism, Art Nouveau, black and white, and a lot of the themes are all the German themes are coming through as well. Yeah, it's a lovely mix of the sort of early 1930s period, even though, of course, it's not set there at all. It's just a distraction and a bit of a red herring. The thing I love about this is so many red herrings or worm herrings thrown in. I mean, they start off by talking about wormholes, because the whole title of the Wormery, I was trying to work out, that's a strange title. I couldn't remember what it meant. And then when they talk about all the wormholes leading to Bianca's, I was thinking, that's why it's called the Wormery, because of all the wormholes. But then they started discussing the worms that they put in tequila shots, which I like tequila, but I can't imagine drinking a worm. Ugh. Regardless. And then some of these worms in compacts. And then major spoiler coming up. Of course, the whole villains of the piece are actually worms, which is just hilarious when you think about it. But it fits an Iris story so well. I'm not sure a straight Doctor Who story you could actually have worms as the villain, like little worms that go in tequila shots. It's hard to imagine that as being possible, but then suddenly you've got worms as the main characters, and so that's just so funny and so hilarious. And then the other thing I think that interesting they do, which I think the new series picks up on, is all the shadows and the fact that the shadows aren't quite attached to people. And of course, there's going to the Vashta Narada. It's going to be a theme that Stephen Moffat will explore later, where you've got a shadow that's alive and will actually ultimately eat you. Well, you've actually here got shadows that are alive and are dangerous and will destroy you as well. So it's interesting, the ideas that you once again picked up years before the new series would do it. But something about shadows is scary. Not having the shadow being in the wrong place, the shadow moving independently of you. It really sets up some lovely images that really play with your mind. Once again, I said, in my head, this is a black and white story. And I see the whole story in black and white.
Interesting. I like it. No, it's well worth a listen. Very enjoyable stuff. We had the opportunity to speak with Gary Russell a little bit about this story. So how about we cross over to Gary and share that chat with you?
Thanks for joining us again, Gary. Good to see you.
That's right.
Now, can you tell us a bit about the Wormery? We've just been discussing it. How did this come about? What do you remember about it?
My main memory of the Wormery is that it came from Paul Mars, and he wanted to do an Iris Wildthyme Doctor story. And I think he wanted to do Peter again. And I said, no, I think it would be quite fun to do Iris against Colin's Doctor. I think there's a lot more frisson and a lot more simpatico there between those two sorts of characters. And so he said he wanted to write it with Steve Cole, and Steve wanted to bring Jason Lobrock in because they wanted to do, as only Paul can ever suggest, they wanted to do cabaret. They wanted to do a full-on nightclub, talk song musical. I think their original idea was the whole thing would be one long musical. And I went, no, because we'd done the Pirates and I was musicaled out. And I said, but it would be quite fun. I don't mind if we have one song. And I was imagining that we would have a sort of Marlena, Iris Wildthyme stretched over a piano, singing this kind of torch song. And it became the sort of upbeat Dumpty 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 song, which she and Maria McCurlin had to do in the studio live, which was great fun. And it spiraled out of there, really. It just became this story about a nightclub that wasn't in 30s Berlin at all, but was in fact in some kind of weird pocket dimension. So it is the most Paul Mars story that I ever did at Big Finish. It's you know, if you said what is Paul Mars by numbers, but I don't mean that in a nasty sense. I mean that in a kind of really quite flattering sense. If everything you wanted from a Paul Mars story could be encapsulated in one place, the Wormery is it. It just felt right. It just felt that this is what we needed to be doing at that point. And in my head, and I think I discussed this with Steve more than Paul, I saw this very much as a pilot for the Iris Wildthyme series. I don't know if we'd even thought we wanted to do one, but it was certainly doing that story made me go, this is viable. We could actually do something with Katy as Iris and make a series out of it. And Paul, you know, when we did it, obviously we had to bring Panda into it. And we brought Tom into it. And we made a series. We only, at that point, only managed to do 2 of them. But the Wormery in my head was very much a sort of, to use the American idiom, it was a backdoor pilot for the Iris Wildthyme series. And then, of course, the Iris Wildthyme series did take off, and they had 4 or 5 box sets out of that eventually. But it all came down to the Wormery. Without the Wormery, we wouldn't have had the Iris series.
Now, you previously cast Katy as Iris in the Excellus series.
Yeah.
Why did you decide Katy, and how do you think she fits the role?
Oh, because when Paul and I were talking about putting Iris into that first Excellus story, he had in mind, he suggested to me Patsy Smart. And I remember Patsy Smart. Do I mean Patsy Smart? No, I don't mean Patsy Smart. I mean Patsy Rowlands. Sorry, Patsy Rowlands. And I remember her from a series called Kinvig, in which she had this dog called Fluffy. Oh, Fluffy, yes. And she'd always talk a bit like that. And I thought, I couldn't shake that out of my head, and just thought, that's not Iris enough for me. But I was thinking along those terms, and somehow in my head, I thought, but I could see Katy doing Patsy Rowlands doing that version of Iris Wildthyme more than I could see Patsy Rowlands doing it. And I remember saying and I think at the time, Paul was throwing up some superb and sometimes quite insane names to play Iris. And I just went back to him and said, look, there's only one person I think could do this and do it justice. Because if this works, this has got to be something we do again and again. And I said, I think Katy Manning. And he just went, absolutely. No 2 ways. Oh, my. And his whole vision of Iris and how he wrote her in... I wish my background would stop doing that. And how he wrote her in that first Excellus was that once we'd settled on Katy, suddenly he was like, yes, I can write it. And he wrote it completely northern. I think in his head, he still had Northeast in his head. He was still imagining a sort of a Durham kind of accent. And Katy came through with this sort of half Mancunian Lancashire, a little bit of Yorkshire, and a couple of other very, very extreme weird parts of the UK and possibly Australia as well, all went into this Irish accent, which she has kept. And it just works brilliantly. And I will say that I think it works even better later on when she's up against Panda. I think that whole personality version that she created for us, and so much of Iris that we have in the audios is Katy using Excellis and to some extent the Wormery as a trampoline to take her into what we did in the solo stuff, as opposed to being necessarily what Paul wrote in Excellis originally. I think Paul wrote a sort of subdued is the wrong word, but I don't think even he imagined. I think Paul probably said, if Peter Davison is at level 6 as normal, Iris needs to be at level 10. And I think Katy went, if Peter's at level 6, Iris needs to be at level 60. And that's the way it went. And that's what we had as a result. And it works brilliantly. And now I can't imagine any other actor in the entire world being Iris Wildthyme. She's just perfect.
Do you have any standout memories of Katy in studio doing Iris, creating the character?
Insanity, just insanity. And more often than not, my main memory of Iris, particularly on both Wormery and Excellis, is other actors looking at me through the glass, kind of going, oh, that's what she's doing. Okay, now I know what I have to raise my game to face off against that. Peter in particular, I think, not knowing he didn't understand who Iris was, I think he was quite shocked. He's not used to having big characters in any of his audios. The Peter Davison audios are generally not big and OTT and fun pieces. And I think he was like, okay, this is not what I was expecting. Whereas when we did Wormery, Colin was completely up for it and was sort of like, right, I can match this. And Peter was like, I don't want to match this. This is terrifying me. This is scary. And just seeing Katy with this big grin on her face, loving every minute of it. I think she'd found something that she could get her teeth into, and a character that she understood as much as you can understand Iris, and just fell in love with. And it was just that energy, the energy she brought to it. And it never goes. Whenever you're doing something with Katy as Iris, however exhausted Katy Manning might be, Iris is never... It lacks any energy, and she kind of takes over and inhabits Katy's body. And so Katy will go, oh, I need to sit down. And then you put her behind the microphone, and it's like Iris goes, you're not sitting down. You are standing up, running around and balancing a teacup on your head.
This is credited to 2 authors, because it's Peter. Sorry, is that right?
No, it's Paul and
Mars.
Paul Mars and Steve Cole.
So why did Stephen get involved?
Oh, that was Paul's request. They wanted to do it together, and they said they wanted, because it was going to be a musical, Jason Lobrick was in there as well. And I think that's just, it's one of those things that I think they'd probably sat down in a pub somewhere and come up with this idea together and written it down on the back of a cigarette packet. And so it was always pitched to me. It was pitched by Paul, but it was always going to be the 2 of them writing it. I have no problem with that. 2 writers is always good.
Yeah, they always refining each other. So Stephen's also down for music. So Stephen Cole and
Steve is a musician. Steve's a guitarist and singer in a band, and always has been for as long as I've known him, and still is now. And Jason is his keyboardist. So yes, the 2 of them wrote. Steve and Jason wrote all the songs and the music, and did the music for the actual play as well. Whereas Paul was not interested in writing songs, I don't think. I think he just wanted the story.
But there's almost 2 distinct styles of music in the play. There's the piano, which has its own character and it's got its own sort of, I guess that's the cabaret stuff. Yeah. And then there's the more traditional Doctor Who music comes in. Do you know whether they wrote it all together, or did one of them lead the piano?
I certainly think that Steve and Jason wrote the piano song together, and then Jason did the music Doctor Who music, because he uses the theme from the piano all the way through it, or that song all the way through it, but in a variety of very, very different ways. Very clever soundtrack. But yes, the song, the main song, I'm absolutely positive is a Steve Cole, Jason Loberick team up completely. I wasn't that involved. I left them to it, you know. Music is not my thing. I don't understand musicals. I don't like musicals. So in the same way that I had with the Pirates, where I left Barnaby and Nick Pegg and Tim to do all the sort of Gilbert and Sullivan pastiche stuff, and I went, oh, nothing to do with me, off you go. I was pretty much the same here, and I was directing this one, which of course I didn't do with Pirates. But I was very much in post-production, just going, you know, I leave you to it. And they turned up on the day with the song, and they did rehearsals with Katy and Maria, while sort of Paul and myself, and I can't think who else is in the cast. We just sat in the corner and go, yeah, we'll have another cup of tea and let them get on with their singing. Aren't we lucky we don't have to worry about that? It was fun. It was a fun studio day. On the Pirates, I knew we'd taken 3 days to do that disc because we had an extra day for the music. And that was another reason why I said I didn't want this to be a full musical, because I knew I only had 2 days. And you might think, well, the song only takes up about 1.5 minutes in the whole play. So that's the length of a normal scene, you know. But of course it isn't. To do the music, to sing and to get it done properly takes more takes and more energy than any number of scenes do. So you lose half a day straight away of your 2-day schedule just for that one song. So I'd factored that into my head as well. And we got the whole thing done quite well.
Now, according to the Big Finish website, it was recorded on the 1st and the 10th of November. Is there a reason why there's a 1.5 week gap in there?
No, not that I can remember. Not at all. Can't have been for people's availability. No, I would have thought it was the normal 2 consecutive days. I don't know why that was. I can't remember. Don't remember that happening at all. I wonder if it's maybe, and I'm putting this out there as a maybe, not that it's fact. I wonder if we actually did the whole play in a day, and the second day is just the music, and it's just the singing. That might make sense, but I don't remember. I don't remember that at all. That seems odd to me. That's a long gap as well between recording sessions. Yeah, can't help you there. Don't know.
When I was listening through, I noticed that there was a trailer for Zagreus after the episode, and this was number 51. Zagreus was number 50. Was this released before Zagreus?
No, but it was probably recorded a long time before Zagreus, because it came out the same month as Zagreus. Although it's 51,
yeah,
they were both released at the same time. And I think we probably put a trailer for Zagreus on there because we're quite proud of Zagreus and just thought, yeah, why not? But yeah, they did come out in exactly the same month. They probably actually came out on exactly the same day.
I remember getting them both in the mail on the same day. I had a package to Australia with both of them in. It was a real dilemma actually, because I think the Wormery got put aside for a long time because of Zagreus and my excitement in that, and listened to that a couple of times. So it's been good going back to the Wormery, because I don't think I gave it the time it deserved at the time.
I think that's probably true of everybody, and I think it was a mistake on our part, and I don't know why we did it. Was Zagreus running late? I don't think Zagreus was running late. I don't know. It does mean that the Wormery has always sort of sat in the shadow a little bit of Zagreus. Here's this big, pounding 3-disc epic. Oh, and here's the Wormery, and we've thrown that in as well. It almost feels like a sort of a bonus disc, which I think is a shame, because I think it did it a great disservice. But I say,
of course, you go straight into Scherzo after that too. So
yeah, but it was popular enough that we were able to do the Irish spin-off that I'd wanted. So it obviously didn't affect it too badly.
Now, originally was going to be a free subscriber story. Is that right?
No. It was always commissioned as a proper play. I say, I think we recorded it a long time before I did Zagreus. I think. No, actually, you said it was November.
November 2002. 2, it was released
Oh, right.
November
Oh, well, there you are.
2003.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
So it was recorded a very long time before it was released.
12 months before, which is a long
12
time
months
for
release,
in those days.
Yeah, I wonder why. That's very odd. I might challenge those dates. I wish I had all my paperwork still. But yes, I'd have been able to tell you that, but I don't remember.
I wish I had all your paperwork too.
Yeah, it'd be great fun, wouldn't it?
That was great listening to Gary and his memories. Also, we've got another very special guest, Katy Manning. So Katy's popped in just to chat to us about Iris. So Katy, thank you for joining us.
I know I look like a sort of roadkill yeti at the moment.
You look fantastic.
I tell you, this is what you get dressed in as soon as you get your foot out of bed. I just show you this. I've got a hot water bottle on my knees. And I've got my gloves on and my pajama bottoms.
If anybody else had turned up looking like that, I would have been surprised. You, not at all. Listen, Katy, thanks for joining us. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Iris. We've been listening to some of your Iris stories and just loving how clever they are. But also, just in fact, it just feels like the perfect part for you. So how did Iris come about? Do you remember?
I can tell you, yeah, I do. Oh, yeah. There's some things I remember in life. Not a lot, because I'm so busy remembering what I'm doing at the moment. But anyway, no, I do actually have a very good memory for things that make me laugh. Anyway, I arrived back from Australia. And Gary Russell said, we've got this character we'd like you to play. Now, bearing in mind, living in Australia, I look back at it now. I mean, Doctor Who didn't hardly come into my life over there. Barry showing me interviews and things. We weren't even talking about Doctor Who. It was really, really different, my life there. And I forget that. Anyway, so I came back. And so I didn't know anything about Paul Mars. I didn't know about this character that Iris Wildthyme. I knew nothing. So I thought, okay. So I looked at him and I looked at the script and I said, well, what sort of voice do you want? What sort of character? He said, as people often do to me, they just said, well, do something. Well, my first one was with the lovely Bernie Summers.
Lisa Bauman or Peter Davison?
Yeah, Peter came. There's another story there. So my first one was with Lisa Bauman, and we didn't have Panda in it or anything. And it opened up and it says, Iris is singing softly to herself while, I don't know, taking dewdrops off cabbages or something, equally fascinating, outside a convent. Okay. So I don't know why, but, so I was sort of doing there and I suddenly went, singing softly to herself. Dan, 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 dan. I don't know why I did that. And then I just went, I don't know, Lovey, how was that? And they said, I think that's it. I think that's the character we're looking for. So Iris was born out of singing softly, not outside a convent. And then we moved on to Peter. And I remember when I first started doing it with Peter, and I'm there going, no, Lovey, you're not going to, I'm doing all that thrashing about and, adding me. And suddenly Peter looked very quietly up at the director and said, is she really playing it that way? And I looked at him and I said, yes, she is, Lovey.
I imagine it would have been a shock. Now, the episode we've been looking at is the Wormery with Colin Baker. And actually, with Colin, that actually feels like the perfect balance with Iris and that doctor.
It's a really good balance, actually, because as I've told you, I've done one with Sylvester and Sophie, where I called Sophie Little Miss Chuckles, which I thought was quite suitable because she's quite serious. I said, oh, come on, Little Miss Chuckles. Anyway, so and of course I adore Colin, and Colin and I had played husband and wife twice on stage. So we were jolly good friends and had been for years prior to him playing Doctor Who. And so when we did this one, I mean, it was a wonderful balance. And he was the one doctor that kind of understood where Iris was coming from. and she's a big character. You know, I could have played it all sorts of very intelligently, quietly like that. But she's got to be camp and outrageous and, you know, to have the adventures and to be travelling in a number 22 Putney bus, which, incidentally, Paul Mars and I came out of Foyles or somewhere like that in Piccadilly Circus, probably Waterstones, but a big bookshop. And as we came up, I swear this is true, the number 22 bus went past us and there was a girl just had got on it and she was wearing a panda hat. I mean, not because she was a fan or anything. It was just the pure, wonderful moment of life that just we went, no. And of course, I know the number 22 bus very well. But, you know, she also, it's very clear that she has... she likes a drink, and that's always been written into it. But we play that quite down when we do anything which is BBC written with the doctors. But it's, you know, I love the fact she's got a bar in the back of the bus, and, you know. So in actual fact, she was traveling in time and space as a female. Just saying.
Yes, long before the Doctor was.
Just saying. Well, you know, before we went into the whole female thing.
Yeah. So how did it come about that you decided to give you your own series?
Well, it sort of, I think it got to the point where I've had 3 different producers. You know, Scott Hancock has produced, Mark Wright has produced, and obviously Gary has produced. So each time, I know when I did it with Scott changed it completely, and I had this gorgeous, very well-known actor, young men, as my companion. And some liked it with Panda and some didn't. I adore working with Panda because that's David Benson, who just happens to be my housemate. So Iris and Panda ended up by living together. Scary. But I think what happened is that she's quite a big character. And it's amazing. There is a following for her, even in America, where I'm surprised they even understand a word she says. But a lot of people come dressed. I put up in Germany this beautiful girl. She had her whole wheelchair done as I'll send you the pictures at some point, of a number 22 bus. Oh. And then the bus that she'd made, and you take the lid off, and inside is all the little tables and feather boas and things like that. And then, of course, you know, I started doing, like, looking like Iris. I had to appear at one point. They asked me to do a convention as Iris, and I didn't realize they actually got a bus. And I had to go, off the top of my head, I had to be Iris and entertain them dressed as Iris. So I've kind of created the look with all the feathers and the, you know, and I made my own hats. So, you know, she grew and grew and grew. And it's amazing how many kind of staunch fans that it has. You know, we'll see what happens to it. But, you know, I've appeared now as Iris with quite a few different characters, and also, you know, done it. I mean, what's over about 20 years, something like that? I don't do years, but about 20 years, something like that.
2001 was the first time. It's 23
really?
years. This is the first
when
time.
I got back to the UK.
Yeah.
So who knew that first day that this would be something ongoing? But I love this character. And I've also done fabulous ones where I've played Iris, Joe, the Doctor, the Brigadier. Oh, sorry. You're leaning against a pussycat calendar.
I thought so.
Would you? All mod cons here, darling. All mod bloody cons. Anyway, so yeah, you know, it's just a character that I think she's wonderful also because she's a little bit naughty.
Yes, she's
a little bit naughty. There's a Christmas one that is so naughty.
Yeah.
I mean, I had such fun doing it. But I was going, really? Because I think sometimes, you know, as a spin-off, we always have very serious this is and that's, and everybody's, you know, doing that. I mean, how wonderful to have this lovely loony. But the wonderful thing about Iris is you don't know much about her.
Yeah.
Because I've worked, it's my job to get. So every now and again, you'll get a kind of you'll see a very soft side to Iris, a sad side, a vulnerable side. But she will always, a bit like me, really, she'll blouse it up to be no problem, But she's also extremely clever. Yeah. And even though they talk about, the drink and the this, and she'll play it like she often isn't as drunk as you think she is. I think she has very clever ways of dealing with situations. So she's never been fully explored, which I think gives you always that fabulous otherworldly secret.
So which character's closer to Katy Manning? Is it Jo or is it Iris?
What do you bloody think?
I knew the answer.
But of course, no, I mean, like all of us, we are multi-layered, and, I'm a little bit bonkers because I go into multiple characters at the drop of a loofah. As those who spend any time with me know, that's my thing. That is my thing. I would be happy if I spent the rest of my life just multi-voicing.
Yeah.
Really.
Some of the stories I've just listened to, the thing that gets me is I want to laugh all the time, and then suddenly you turn the character around and there's such pathos there, and I just want to cry because you've taken this really high emotion of laughter and funny, and then suddenly she's serious and she's lonely or sad or deserted. Because I mean, her love for the Doctor is never requited, and there's this vulnerability that comes out, and suddenly your heart breaks for her. So it just is a very complex character.
In any comedy character, from my belief, my understanding, that you cannot have a one-dimensional, flat, funny, straight up. There has to be those layers. Otherwise, you get from that wonderful laughter, and then you go like that, and then you go like that again. It's like when you're writing a story or reading a script, you start out and something exciting happens, and then it goes into, something, and then boom, you can set it off again. And I think to play any comedy character on one level is never going to work. There has to be, to make the character truthful, some pathos, and especially when you're playing a fairly outlandish character, there must be that pathos. Otherwise, there's going to be no reality, no truth to it. And there must be truth in every character you play.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you seen I'll be right with you in a minute.
Have you met Paul Mars? Had much to do with him?
Oh, Paul Mars and I are such close friends because this isn't the only thing I've done with Paul Mars. I have done audios for Bafflegab with Paul Mars, where I did Baker's End with Tom Baker and then with Colin Baker, playing completely different characters, like really scary, nasty little corn people, and all sorts of characters, and also a sort of straight almost assistant, but it wasn't Doctor Who. That was called Baker's End, where Tom Baker plays a giant cat. Don't ask. And then and always with David Benson as well. And then I did another one, which was, I can't remember what it was called now. But it was all about a glam rocker, and I played Princess Margaret. I played a landlady and things like that. And then he has written, as I say, he wrote the ones where I played Iris and Jo and the Doctor. And this was before we had Tim and everything. So it was a long time ago, and I was playing everybody. And then recently I did the 3 books for him where he gave me over 50 characters to find. So, Paul's attitude, he is the most wonderful writer. He is the most glorious man. I absolutely adore him. And if anything he ever asks me to do, I'm there. Even when he did the 50, I said, thanks a lot, Paul. In lockdown, here I am. And I just have to quickly tell you, I was the only studio they could find that I could work in, because could only have one tech. He was French, hardly spoke any English, and it makes jazz. And I'm in this studio with drums and guitars and, nothing really for somebody. And of course, he couldn't correct me. I mean, I can't tell you how hard that was, but how challenging and how exciting it was. And then, who's the rock star? I can't remember. Ozzy.
Osborne.
No, another one. Anyway, as I'm walking out, in walks their drummer. I thought, this is so non-Big Finish, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Paul is one of some of the little books he's written, the stories he's written. He is such a terrific writer. I adore him.
Yeah. Because there's very few actors who could pull off 50 voices. I could think you would just do with these. You've probably got 80 or 90 in there easily.
Well, I discovered a long time ago that I could go up to about 25. And then, of course, in the early days when I was doing things like Joe, I was doing Joe, the doctor, the brigadier and everything else because I didn't have a doctor.
Yeah.
So I kind of, and then also I'd done quite a lot in Australia where I multi-voiced in Carter. So it's the thing I do best, not a well woman. I did that all in a day.
Yes.
And I did voices off the page as they come. So that takes, and that's what I did with the books in the 50s. That takes something, I think it's called insanity to do. You have to be completely bonkers, I swear. But you also have to be very aware of every emotion, every character, because when you interrupt as another character, that other character, right, has to be feeling what and reacting to what's just been said in exactly that moment, and even interrupt, which I'm very good at interrupting myself in another voice. Go figure. You wouldn't think my daughter is now taking on corporate law as an added thing to her massive job, and my son's doing. I don't know. How did they manage with a mother? They used to come home and say, "Mummy, who are you going to be tonight?" Matthew.
I watched an interview recently. Barry Crocker sent me an interview with you and he at on Ray Martin, and you were beautifully dressed and you were so proper and you were speaking the perfect Queen's English. I was thinking, who the heck is this person?
I know, darling. I mean, it's so weird though. Looking back at that, there's another one which I haven't sent you where I did some cooking. That's hysterical. I while cooking something that I certainly would never eat. And we got to this pot banging and they said, "Oh, I think Katie's in the studio." And then and then they say, "And I'm putting in all this butter," and they said, "That's a lot of butter." And I said, "Oh, who cares? I'm throwing it into this chicken." And I said, "It'll be absolutely delicious." And they said, "Oh," I said, "But of course I wouldn't eat it. I'm a vegetarian."
Now, I believe you're writing a book at the moment. Can you tell us anything about what you're up to? Secrets, hush, hush.
Iris, you don't need to know about me, darling. I'm up to a lot at the moment. I've just finished another really interesting audio. Very different and surprising. The Quintessence, which is a Joe Jones, which I'm very proud of that one. I think
brilliant.
It's really got Joe. You can see this woman of this age, which I think is once again quite interesting, doing what she's doing, being who she is. And I'm also commissioned to write so I'm at the moment deeply embedded in files of books, and I've got bits of paper everywhere. I'm like my father. You couldn't throw away a newspaper or a cigarette packet or anything or a napkin because Daddy would have written on it. And it's in my blood. I do the same. People say, "Oh, don't you use your, would you tell them?" I said, "No, I send a whole story on an email on my iPhone. So get off my case." "Oh, but it would be so easy if you'd," I said, "No, this is how I do it because of my eyes." And every time I'm sitting on a bus, I'll suddenly go, "Oh," and you write it down. Because thoughts don't come to me if I'm sitting down doing it. They only come to me, which is why I wasn't very good at school. I have to be wandering about doing other things. And then thoughts, that's when we're cleaning. I love cleaning. Janie's going to love it when she comes home because to get inspiration, I've been cleaning her house. Oh, my friend, we don't know whether to be grateful or embarrassed that Katy comes over and cleans.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing what you do next.
I'm looking forward to seeing what I do next. But it's always such a joy to talk to you guys. It really is.
Hello there, this is John Coleshaw, and I'm just slightly borrowing the voice of John Pertwee for a moment. I don't know, maybe a regeneration might happen. Yes, it happened there. Yes, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio. Wonderful chaps. Both of them.
Well, that was incredible. Having Katy just decide to pop in because I think she really enjoys playing this character. So it was great to hear her thoughts about Iris Wildthyme. Let's move on to the second story that we're going to talk about. And this is extremely exciting for me. It's something that I've been wanting to review since starting the podcast. And I can't believe we've been going nearly 5 years, Philip, and I haven't done this yet. And that is The Natural History of Fear, main range story number 54. It was released in February 2004, so what is it, 21 years old almost. There you go. Yep. I'll read the blurb and see if you can follow it, folks. It is a criminal offence to copy or attempt to copy any personality or memory-related article shown or displayed in this public theatre, including this warning. Punishment or conviction is an unlimited reduction of authorised overtime hours and total personality revision. You're not permitted to bring any jukebox or recording equipment into this public theatre. This will be treated as an attempt to breach copyright. Any person doing so can be ejected and the editor may confiscate such articles. We ask the public to be vigilant against any such activity and report any matters arousing suspicion to their local conscience. Thank you. Public warning. Faction against character theft.
Doctor Who, The Natural History of Fear.
This is the voice of Light City. Attention. Welcome to your new workday. Today is Jubilee Day. Citizens may celebrate for one day without arrest or punishment. Happiness through acceptance. Welcome to your Jubilee Day. Welcome to your Jubilee.
Do you worship? Do you go to church? Do you believe in God? How many gods are there? What's his name? What does he look like? Perhaps he's a woman, or perhaps he has a beard, perhaps a bearded woman, perhaps he's many gods, a whole army of gods. Perhaps he's plotting to attack us now, to destroy us, a whole army of gods, rampaging across a desert, a plateau, to kill us, to wipe us out. Would God do that? Is God fair? Does he love us? Does he hate us? Perhaps he's teasing us, perhaps he's toying with us, perhaps he's playing with us, playing with our minds, perhaps we're all just part of one big experiment, perhaps we're just toys, perhaps we're all little toy figures that God is playing with, and sometimes he bites off our heads, and sometimes he stamps on us, and sometimes he throws his toys back in the box, and he doesn't want to play with us anymore, he doesn't want us anymore, he wants to get rid of us, he wants to get rid of us, to throw us all away, get rid of us. God couldn't do that to us. We didn't know he loves us. Surely he loves us, doesn't he? Doesn't he? Isn't that true? Doesn't he love us? Don't we all love each other? Perhaps that's the answer. Love isn't that what we need? But then perhaps love is evil. Is it a sin to love? Is it a sin? Is it wrong? Is it wrong to love? To hate? Perhaps to hate is safer. Or to feel nothing. Do we feel nothing? Do we feel nothing? Perhaps we'll be safer if we just feel nothing. And if we don't speak, perhaps we'll be safer. If we don't speak, perhaps we'll be quiet. If everybody's quiet, then we'll say nothing.
This is the voice of Light City. Attention. Welcome to your new workday. Today is Jubilee Day. Citizens may celebrate for one day without arrest or punishment. Happiness through acceptance. Welcome to your Jubilee Day. Welcome to your Jubilee.
Natural History of Fear, The Facts and the Trivia, written by Jim Mortimore, recorded the 11th and 12th of May 2003 and released in February 2004. Director was Gary Russell, music and sound design by Jim Mortimore, the author. Executive producer was Jacqueline Rayner, producers Gary Russell and Jason Hagelery, cover art by Steve Johnson. This is starring Paul McGann, Indy Fischel, Conrad Westmass, Sean Carlson, Jane Hills, and also in the only Big Finish stories, Jeffrey Searle, Alison Sterling, Ben Summers, and Wink Taylor. The CD and website have no names of characters listed. The website states, character names are not given in the narrative, and the cast lists present only the names of the actors. This reflects the fact that the performances were considered more important than the names of the characters. So it's very weird that when you go to the website, there's no characters listed, even including the Doctor or Charlie or Carice. Only titles are used in the play for a couple of characters, such as Editor and Conscience, otherwise everyone is unnamed. Gary had previously worked with writer Jim Mortimore on the audio visuals, the precursor to The Big Finish. The play is written so the cast have to double up and triple up as part of the plot. Jim Mortimore also wanted to direct the story, but Gary wasn't going to let him do that. And this is the facts and the trivia.
Thank you, Philip. How did you feel going back to this?
I have always loved this story. This is one that I have listened to several times over the years. The last time would have been when I was doing my whole run-through of The Doctor and Charlie, the 8th Doctor. So that was probably about 3 years ago, I think, 3 or 4 years. So this may be the longest gap. From the moment this starts, I am just engrossed in what's going on. This time I did remember how it was going to end, and so I'm actually listening with that in mind. Previously, and certainly the first time I listened to it, I had no idea where it was heading. It was just a series of characters voiced by the Doctor, voiced by Charlie, but it wasn't the Doctor and it wasn't Charlie, and I couldn't quite work out what was going on. And so you're just intrigued and driven along by the plot, which is a very dystopian society. It creates a society so clearly, but it's such a negative, awful society. And yet you can see traces of our world in it. And actually, at the moment, listening to it currently, I'm seeing an awful lot of our world in this story. There's very few stories that engage me quite so much, and you just hang on every word to try and find what's going on. And then when it's revealed at the end, it is so satisfying. But only could you do this on audio. There's a lot of Big Finish stuff. I think wouldn't that make a fantastic Doctor Who story? And I often wonder why. Russell T. Davies and others haven't taken some of the Big Finish stories, some of the really good ones, and turned them into plays, on TV shows, because they would be absolutely fabulous. This you could not do. This can only be done in the audio medium because of the ending. So listening to this again, I just enraptured by it, confused by it, but just the performances are so strong. And the soundscape is so amazing. Just the music, but the other sounds too, and the droning and hum and doors, and the voices.
What about the spinning top?
Light City, the spinning top. There's just so many sounds, which is just so much out of this, and I can just hear them outside of this and know it's referred back to this, because in my ears there's so many of these sounds that are just so powerful. And as I said, the voices, the announcements of Light City and Jubilee Day or High Productivity Day, astounding. And Jim Mortimore has done the most amazing job with this. What do you find going back to it, Dwayne?
There have been times where I've listened to a piece of music that I haven't heard before, and I've been so blown away by. So if I put on an album and I cannot turn it off until the end, I'm often buzzing with what I've just listened to. It's such a work of art. And there's a few pieces of music that I've listened to in that way over the years. You only get that effect the first time, and it's similar with this. You can only get that initial buzz the first time, because once the ending happens, you can never forget the ending unless you listen to it in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. But that's okay. You can still go back and re-listen to it and get the same effect. That's what I had over this. When you say confusing, you're confused by it. I still am confused by this, but the words, the delivery, the way everything's done, the soundscape, the way everything's put together, it's just magnetic, and I cannot stop listening. It's an incredible story, the way it gets you in, because you get to a certain part only a couple of minutes in, and you have to know what is going on. And this is a 2-hour play. Keep in mind, actually, all the episodes exceed 30 minutes. I think one of them.
One's almost 40, I think.
Yeah, the last episode goes for nearly 40 minutes. And a lot of that episode is the exposition about the rest of the play, which you need. Which actually, I was surprised that it went on a lot longer than I remembered. I remembered the final explanation being a lot quicker and shorter. But this time I found it longer for some reason. But yeah, it just is. It's almost hypnotic, and I still get that buzz at the end of it that I often get with music that I've listened to the first time. It is really a piece of literary art, if you ask me. It's something that you can look at or listen to. You look at it like a painting, and then you go back and you look at the painting again, you see something different, or you see it from a different angle. This is one of those things that just like that. It is one of the most amazing pieces of experimental Big Finish, and we've talked about some of the experimental Big Finish in the past, but this is, for me, this is my personal favourite of the experimental ones, and they're all good, but this one just blows me away every time.
I do think Jim Mortimore was able to bring his whole vision to life, and so as an author, he wanted to direct it and wasn't allowed to. It would have been very curious had he been allowed to direct as well, because I think it would have been curious. But it's his vision in terms of it is his script, his story. He does the soundscape, he does the music, and he designed the cover. He didn't actually do the cover, but he explicitly said what the cover had to be. And so the whole package that you get is really Jim Mortimore and his vision. And so crazy brain Jim Mortimore has. I'd love to talk to him sometime. But just to be able to get his entire vision onto a disc, where you've got the actors, and the actors have brought their interpretation, but you can see the actors are really thriving on the script they've been given. And it's so clear what they're to do and what's in the situation that it's one of those things where you really see one person's vision come to life in a huge way.
And I'm just thinking, as you were speaking then, I was thinking about the trailer, and I think the trailer is not in the audio that you hear in the trailer is not actually in the story.
No, it's not.
So, it's done by Sean Carlson. So this is his first introduction to Big Finish. So I wonder what he was thinking at the time. We'll have to go back and listen to our interview with him, because we did discuss it with him as being his first.
And Sean Carlson will go on to play Narvin, just for those people who aren't quite, as we just drop names.
Yeah. Sorry.
We'll go to Narvin.
Yeah. So Narvin in Gallifrey is most famous for that now, been playing Narvin for 20 years. But this was his first appearance at Big Finish. He must have thought, what have I got myself into? But at the same time, it could have, if it grabbed me as a listener, it must have grabbed those actors too, as on the page as well. So yeah, it just left me, when I listened to it, I think it was 2 days ago that I listened to this, and as soon as it finished, I thought to myself, I could just start listening to this again from the beginning, and I'll get more out of it, or different things out of it. That's just how good it is. So for the £8 that it's there for on the website, I think it's definitely
£4.
Oh, sorry, yeah, $8, £4 it is, yeah. So do yourself a favour, if you like experimental weird stuff, you're going to really, really like this, and it's weird in a good way, in a very good way.
It's also it's dystopian. So it's 1984. It's Happiness Patrol. It's Dare the Triffids. It's that sort of future bleak dystopian landscape where authoritarianism has gone mad. So it's not far beyond the vision of 1984 that George Orwell had in terms of where the future could head. Because 1984 was originally 1948. Because George Orwell wasn't predicting the future, he was actually talking about his own society if it continued the way it was going. So George Orwell was making a prediction based on 1948, what the future would look like. He saw that, and this natural history of fear is somewhere we could head to if we're not careful. And the importance of democracy, the importance of people having a voice, and the importance of questions and education and knowledge, which are all things that seem to be more and more unimportant to people, and in fact despised by people. People who are too smart are just now, they're the elite. And so there's a real danger that we're trying to move away from actually growing and understanding life better, I think. And this is addressing, well, what happens when you can't ask questions, because asking questions leads to knowledge, and knowledge leads to sadness. It's a lot of the philosophy in this is very fascinating. And
more than sadness, it leads to dissatisfaction. That was the ultimate.
Yes.
So questions were a big no-no in the story. One thing I did pick up on this listen through was that I'd always previously thought the revelation of who everyone was in the story and why they were the way they were came right at the end. But on this listen, I picked up clues in episode 2. They were there. And then they were sort of quickly dismissed by someone getting revised and edited again, and they were shut down. But then it came out in full right at the end. So, yeah, you do get something different on every listen. So, with all that said, we were able to have a chat with Gary Russell about this story. So, shall we hear what he has to say about it?
Sounds like a great idea.
Or should I have asked that question?
I'm going to attempt to interview you without asking any questions for this. In the spirit of the
actual thing. Well, no. You can ask the questions. You just have to edit them afterwards, and make them make no sense. So, natural history of fear. Where did that come from? Well, obviously, it came from Jim, who is a genius for this kind of thing, and he wanted to do something. Originally, he wanted to do something non-linear. And at the time I said no. Of course, we did non-linear later with Creatures of Beauty. But I said, no, I don't want it to be non-linear, but I don't mind if it's a little bit weird and challenging, but the story's still got to go from A to B to C. So he did that. He wanted to write, I think he just pitched me Paul McGander's 1984, which is always going to appeal to me enormously. And I left him to it. It's Jim. You don't really interfere too much with Jim in the writing process. You just let him get on and see what he delivers. And he delivered this script. And as always with Jim, it would have taken about 6 discs to actually do the script he delivered. So I went back to him and said, this is lovely. That's an entire season you've just written. Now make it fit on 2 discs, please. So that's about 10,000 words per disc maximum. And I remember him being quite sort of, but I can't store it. But of course he did, and made it much better as a result. And also made it makeable, because as always with Jim as well, the original 8-hour version had about 68 characters in it. And it was because of that we came up with the idea that actually we would, I as a director, don't like doubling up. I don't like employing an actor and saying you're going to play 3 or 4 different parts in this play. To me, that's just lazy, and you should write a play that doesn't need that many characters. You write a play that needs the actors you've got. But with Natural History of Fear, not only did I agree to change that, but we made a virtue of it, and it became part of the story that everyone plays lots and lots of different roles. Because they have to for the way the story is told, because everyone is being rewritten and their memories and their personalities being rewritten, and it works fantastically. And I got in a bunch of superb local actors up in Bristol, so they could all play lots of different parts. And one of them was Sean Carlson. It was the first time I worked with Sean, And I'm sure he tells a story that he didn't even know what he was playing until he turned up in the studio and I allocated on the day, you're doing this part, you're doing this part. That's not true. And that's absolutely not how it was done. But it would have been a fun way to do it, to just throw people in at the deep end and said, right, you're now going to play this part. But what I thought was so brilliant about Natural History of Fear is the twist at the end. It's one of those ones, it's like Whispers of Terror and Omega and Live 34 and things like that, that you could only do on audio. You could not have done this in a book. You couldn't do it in a comic. You couldn't do it on TV. Natural History of Fear is just perfect Big Finish audio because of the twist. And I loved it. I just thought, yes, that has sold this whole idea to me. And we were doing it, and I remember being halfway through. Jim wanted to direct it as well, and I put my foot down at that one, partly because I wanted to direct it because I'm a mad egomaniac and I direct everything, and partly because I knew that if Jim directed it himself, we'd still be in studio 8 days later, because he's a perfectionist, and I'm a perfectionist, but I'm also a realist, and Jim wasn't, so he wasn't allowed to direct it, but he was in studio, I think, certainly for one of the days. And I just remember McGann halfway through the making of this just looking at me and going, you know, this is not only the best script you've ever given me to play Doctor Who. He said, this is one of the best scripts I've ever done in my career. I love every single thing about this story, because politically it aligned with him, and it aligned with me, and it aligned with Nick, and it aligned obviously with Jim. And it all just came together, and it was just a clever, intelligent Doctor Who story, of which, you know, that I'm not saying the stories are stupid, but we didn't very often go intellectual at Big Finish, because on audio you don't want to go too intellectual because it ends up just being lots of talk. And yet Natural History of Fear, which is just talk and walk, people walking and talking for 2 discs, it works brilliantly and was hugely successful. You know, I said to Jim at the time, this is going to be one of those stories that divides people quite strongly. They're either going to love it or hate it. I wasn't expecting anyone to be in sort of, oh, it's all right, I guess. And I was wrong in the fact that nearly everybody loves it and very few people hate it. And a few people do go, well, it's all right, I suppose. I didn't really understand it. But most people loved it, and it was hugely successful at the time.
I think at the
moment, Jim was very keen that the cover design was Jim's. He said, I think it's actually on the first page of the script. He says, the cover of this CD must literally be a spinning top, the toy spinning top. It has to be that. That's the linchpin for the whole story. And I went, yeah, all right. Thinking at the time, well, we'll see. I'll want to put Paul McGann's face on there somewhere. And you know, of course, Jim was right.
Something else Jim inserted was the old theme tune from the audio visuals.
Oh, the audio.
Tell us about how that got in there.
My idea. That was definitely my idea. I said, you know, we should use the audio visuals theme as the fake Doctor Who theme. And he was like, because he had it. He had the masters of that, I think, because it's his version. It's his mix of the Gregory Glass version of the audio visuals theme. God, there are so many audio visuals references. I mean, all the plays that they're taught, all the fictions, all the stories, they're all old audio visuals stories. We had such fun doing that. Such fun.
Do you want to give a bit of history with Jim and you? Because maybe many people may not know the audiovisual history with him and you.
Well, I've known Jim. Jim was one of the very first people I ever met in Doctor Who fandom back in about 1980, I think. He was a friend of a friend called Alan Hayes, was a friend of mine, and Jim was his best mate. And when we were setting up audio visuals, which is a thing that was an audio production thing I did with Bill Baggs back in the 80s, and that's how I met Nick Briggs, because he came in and played the Doctor for us. And at some point, I think I'd suggested to Bill using Jim for music, because Jim was a musician. And that sort of spiraled, and then Jim started doing post-production, started writing, and wrote some of the best audio visuals going. So there'd always been the connection. So that when Big Finish started, Jim was one of the first people to come to us and say, hello, don't forget I still exist. And it just took me a while to find the right slot for Jim to fit into. Because as I say, Jim, he'd done a few novels for BBC Books and Virgin Books at that point as well. And they're always the biggest ones. They're always the most dense. And saying to Jim, you can't be that dense. You can't be that hard for the listeners on audio. You've actually got to have a fun, rollicking adventure. And so finding something that would fit Jim and McGann, to my mind, and I think Jim and Paul knew one another because they're both Bristol based. And I think they'd encountered each other somewhere along the lines. I remember Paul recognizing Jim's name. So again, there was that sort of, it was obvious to get him to write this as a Paul McGann. And this wouldn't have, I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it. You couldn't have done it with Colin, Peter or Sylvester. It isn't right for their Doctors. It works brilliantly for the Doctor, Charlie and Carys. It's a fantastic experimental piece. You wouldn't do it more than once, but it was absolutely the best writer and the perfect writer for that perfect play.
I love the way it allowed all three of them to shine. It wasn't just Doctor heavy, but Conrad had a major role in that. And that was Conrad's first recording, was it? Or did he?
No, it was his first. It was his first.
So Creed of the Crummin came after.
The first thing we did in that season. We recorded the whole thing out of order. We did Natural History of Fear first, then we did Cromon, then we did Will's one, and then we ended on Scherzo. So yeah, we shot that whole season completely out of order, and we started with, "Hey, you are, Conrad, throw you in at the deep end." It kind of ties in as well. I've done it with Zagreus, where I think when you've got good actors, it's quite fun to say, don't just play the same parts you normally play. And I did that with Zagreus, got everyone in to play different parts. And so Natural History of Fear was for Conrad in India, and Paul was a chance to do something else that wasn't them playing the Doctor, Charlie and Carys.
Was it Conrad's performance in Zagreus that got him the role?
No, Conrad's performance in Omega is what made me cast him for Carys. I enjoyed working with him in Omega, and so I created Carys for him. So that's why he's in Zagreus. He's in Zagreus because I knew he was going to be a companion going forward. So it was just a case of, well, I want to get all our Big Finish companions in, and that includes Carys.
Gotcha.
Timey-wimey.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I think this is one of my favorite stories, certainly of the whole sort of area, because it's so experimental. It's listening to today, it's so relevant today. I think with Brexit and Trump and a lot of the way the world's going, there's a lot of truth in this, and it really is quite reflective.
But I think that, it's, I don't know whether Jim would say its origins are in 1984, but to me, its origins are in 1984. And 1984 will never stop being something that we should all be scared by. And the world's in a terrible state at the moment, particularly with Trump in charge of America, and Putin as well. And the whole world is going down this very sort of narrow, dark, twisted path. And I think, yes, 1984, Orwell predicted that, and we've never really moved away from it. Every so often the wave comes back and we hit this darkness. And yes, Natural History of Fear, therefore, will never go out of fashion.
Do you think, in reflection, this may not serve the character of Carys as well as it could have done, having just introduced him and then the very next story?
No, I don't think it makes any difference. No difference at all. It's about the actors, and the story isn't about the Doctor and Charlie and Carys anyway. It's about three spiders. So no, I don't think it affects that in the slightest.
Just in terms of making experimental stories, your era was full of very experimental, most of which worked. But in terms of what you're trying to do, how many experimental stories were you trying to introduce in a season?
I never consciously said I want to do experimental stories. That there was no conscious thing about that. I was just lucky that I was there at the start of Big Finish, so everything I did looked reasonably original and fresh, whether it was experimental or not. After 25 years, everything's a repeat of something to some extent. I was just very, very lucky that I was able to do the first of everything. So yeah, I did experimental stories because I wanted to play with audio as a medium, and I was very keen to say to people who thought that audio is just like people reading books, so why don't we just read books instead? I was very keen to say, no, this is a medium that every so often you need to do stories that sell the medium. And I will say that I never consciously went out and said to writers, please do me something that can only be done on audio. A story would come from a writer and you'd go, oh, they're clever, they've worked out this can only be done on audio. I never said to anyone, I'm commissioning you to write something that can only be done on audio. That always came from the writers themselves. And it would just be, my interest would be piqued by that. And I go, oh, this is good. But I remember reading Nev's treatment for Omega. And I was thinking, it's a fun story about Omega and Time Lords, and it's all very good. And then I got to the end of episode 3 and I went, oh, you clever man, you've realized that this only works on audio with that pulling the rug out moment. And thought, yeah, that immediately to my mind is like, yeah, that's an instant commission, because it's pulled the rug out from me as the producer. That's going to do the same to the audience. And Natural History of Fear and Live 34 and quite a lot of them. But I never commissioned anyone to do that. I never sat down and said, I never said to Johnny, I want you to go and write Flip Flop and make it a story that the disc can be played in any order and you don't miss anything out. He came up with that idea. Live 34, James and Andrew came up with that idea. Whispers of Terror, Justin came up with that idea. The ideas come from the writers. I'm not that smart. I just see something and go, yes, that can only work on audio. Let's do it. And you said some work better than others. I think on the whole, my sort of 96, 98 plays, I would say the hit rate was, of the weird ones, was pretty much there. I don't think there's nothing I regret. There's nothing I'd ever sit down and go, oh, I wish I hadn't made that, because what I thought might be weird and experimental isn't weird and experimental. I think the problem, my only ones that I look back on and think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or I'd done that differently, is none I say I wish I hadn't done, but I'd done differently, were the more standard, straightforward ones. Ones that weren't weird and unusual, but were just like, there's just little moments in them that you think, yeah, actually I should have done something different with that. I shouldn't have let that go through, and that's the power of hindsight, because I didn't think it at the time. That's just, talking to people over the last 25 years and going, oh yeah, I can see why that doesn't work. Yeah.
I guess everything's a variation on a theme, especially with the experimental type stories, or the weirder stories, as you call them. 1984, there certainly makes you think of 1984, Natural History of Fear. But I also think of an old Twilight Zone episode called Eye of the Beholder, where the whole episode is set around a patient with a bandage around her face, and they're taking off layers of the bandage all the way to the end of the episode. And then at the end of the episode, the final bandage comes off and she's absolutely beautiful. You think there's going to be this grotesque thing, and it just sticks everything on its head. And I think that is what Natural History of Fear did too. It put everything on its head, had me guessing the whole way through.
Well, that's the point of good drama, isn't it? And that's what Jim's very, very writing is all the, you never, I think, listening to Natural History of Fear, if you've got past the first 30 seconds, then you're hooked and you're going to listen to that to the end, because you desperately want to understand what it's all about. That's clever writing. That's very clever writing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, listen, thanks to you so much for sharing your memories of that story, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Take care, guys.
Hello, this is Sean Carlson, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio.
As always, thanks to Gary Russell for spending time with us to talk about this. We love his work, and he's certainly got a great legacy in the work that he did for Big Finish, hasn't he?
He has, and just his mind, his story, the way he pulled people together. Big Finish survived because of him. Let's face it, those first 96, 98 stories, plus the spin-offs, really gave the shape to what Big Finish would become, and allowed it to become a huge So yeah, very, very thankful for his knowledge and his history and his stories. Thanks for sharing, Gary.
Very good. All right, to finish up, just a couple of other things that we have been listening to. Now, I have been listening to. Oh, no, I can't. I can't tell you what I've been listening to yet because the list there says it's your turn to tell us first, Philip.
It's my turn. Okay, I am going to recommend the 50% Doctor Who podcast.
Excellent.
So it's an Australian video podcast. It's YouTube. It's a YouTube channel.
Podcast 2.
Podcast 2. These are a couple of young guys in Perth who I got to meet in person in Brisbane. So they've been in contact with me. They were really keen to get 5 minutes with Sylvester to interview him for their podcast channel. And I agreed because they seem like nice guys. And so I said to Sylvester, yeah, I'm happy to give them 5 minutes. So they have done 2 programs actually about the trip. So there's a talk with them, the 2 of them plus a guy from Adelaide.
Josh Snares.
Josh. And there's another guy from Queensland called Crispy Pro.
Yep.
And if you're one of the young guys that listen to us and our audience, you possibly already know who they are because they've got big young followings. Crispy Pro will only I don't think he's watched any of the classic series or very, very, very little understanding of the classic series, and he's just not interested in it, which just breaks my heart. But the other guys are really keen about the classic series as well. And so, it was great getting to meet. We met them in Brisbane. I actually got them up. We got them up, and they had a bit of a chat about what they do, which was fantastic. But the 50% podcast guys, they did a 5-minute interview with Sylvester, and they were just so over the moon to spend time with him. And so you can watch the little 5-minute interview with them. You can hear a bit about what their perception of the event that we ran in Brisbane, and also Josh talks a bit about Adelaide because he was in Adelaide as well. Strongly recommend. Have a listen to their couple of episodes all about us.
Well, it wasn't just about us, but I did watch their episode yesterday, which included Sylvester's interview, but they were reviewing Remembrance of the Daleks, so it was interesting to get their take. It's their favourite. Sylvester is their favourite classic Doctor, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
These are younger fans who've gone back, and I was a bit brokenhearted for some of the comments they said about the classic series because that's my era, isn't it? So, great to hear that they're so enamoured with Sylvester and got the chance to meet him. It was really nice to hear their thoughts and good review of the episode too, I thought.
Yeah, it was. What are you, Dwayne? What have you listening to?
I have been catching up on some stuff that I've sadly missed over the last year. And one of those is a 4th Doctor box set called Metamorphosis, which I've been listening to those episodes. I can't remember the name of the first one. It stars Annette Badland as the toy maker. I think it's called Matrushka or something like that. I could be pronouncing it wrong. The third story is Metamorphosis, which features the Geoffrey Beevers Master, which is really good, written by Lisa McMullen. But the standout for me was the middle story called The Caged Assassin by Matthew Sweet, which features a villain called Top the Wombat, and it is something you have got to hear to believe. I loved it. Lots of mentions of Tasmania in it, because, of course, we've got lots of wombats in Tasmania. But, yes, and it was a historical figure that a poet from the 19th century who has these wombats that I didn't know about. So it got me to do some research on this poet as well, who was quite an eccentric and weird guy. So Matthew Sweet could write an eccentric and weird script, which includes these talking wombats, which is it just has blown me away. I loved it. Have you heard that yet? The Caged Assassin? Is that one you've missed as well?
I have.
Yep.
No. I have listened to it. I mean, it's another example of box set names I'm hating. Just Metamorphosis. I'm not enjoying the box set names because I don't think it does justice. But anyhow, but do you know what we call wombats in New South Wales?
No.
Speed humps.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
They are always destroying cars. They're just stupid animals that wander on the road.
They are not a animal you want to hit with your car because they've got like a
they're like bricks.
They're like a tank on the.
They're thick, solid muscle, and yes, we just know them as speed humps in New South Wales.
Yeah. But anyway, that's what I've been listening to, and very happy to catch up with that. There's another one. I've still got to catch up with the Fifth Doctor box set, The Great Beyond. I haven't heard that yet, and I'm always happy with the Fifth Doctor stuff. So when I'm away over the next couple of weeks, I'll be catching up with a few that I've missed through the year. So looking forward to that.
Fantastic.
All right, that'll do us for this instalment of the Sirens of Audio. Be sure to subscribe, give us a like, send us your reviews. To Apple Podcasts, you can do that. That'll get more people to hear us. And you can contact us on all our socials at Audio Sirens. Philip, it's been great to have your company.
And great spending time with you too, Dwayne.
We'll catch you all next time.
Bye, everyone.
This has been the Sirens of Audio with our review of the Wormery and the Natural History of Fear, with our guests Gary Russell and Katy Manning, and your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by Joe Kramer. Catch up with all the latest info, including news on our live events at sirensofaudio.com. Got some feedback? Send your emails to sirensofaudio@gmail.com, or you can find us on all our social media at Audio Sirens. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.